Right, here we are. The first
Perfect.
Molzi live webinar. What a moment.
Exciting.
Yeah, apologies in advance for any technical issues. This is our first one. We'll try and be, I think I'd be happy if we're 80% slick and professional. I think that would be a good result for the first one.
Yeah, and with my Virgin Media issues this week, we'll see if I'm on for the whole webinar. Whether you have to go solo for a bit, Chris.
Yeah, I've prepared a halftime show. And just one word of warning: both me and Charlie have got babies under 1 year old in the house, so there is a slight chance of meltdown at bedtime. At which point we'll be pumping the mute button on the microphone. So if anyone who's got kids has tuned in for an hour of peace and quiet, potential apologies if it all kicks off. But anyway, let's start with a quick introduction. I'm Chris. I started Molzi almost 3 years ago. Tomorrow's our third birthday. We're a full-service Amazon agency. We work with brands of all sizes all over the world. We get involved in the front end, the content advertising, but also the nuts and bolts, operational support, supply chain, chargeback. But I guess people haven't tuned in for a sales pitch, so I'd like to introduce, I guess, are you my guest? Is that how this works? My guest for the next hour, Charlie Merrills, who's recently joined Molzi. He's one of, I think, only 2 people that have joined us this month who I've actually met in person, which is crazy to think.
Not this month, though. We haven't met this month, to be clear.
That's true, yeah, from 2 meetings apart. But yeah, I guess first of all, welcome to Molzi, Charlie. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much.
And welcome to our first webinar. And maybe you could start by just kind of quickly introducing yourself, what you've been up to previously, and maybe how you're planning to support Molzi over the next years and months.
Yeah, so I joined having spent the last 5 years working at Amazon. Joined Amazon initially as an in-stock manager. I worked in the beauty team. I was there for 18 months and then made the move over to become a vendor manager. Joined the beers, wines and spirits team, fun category to be in. Close to my heart. Learned a lot as well along the way there, and kind of moved through that team. I was there for then the point until I left. Moved through the team though to take on more of a leadership role at various points throughout that time. I managed each of the different beers, wines, sparkling and spirits categories, and for the last year or so while I was there, I was the category leader for the entire UK beers, wines and spirits team. And yeah, I've joined John Molzi. My remit, the main part of my remit that I'm working on is really making sure we've got the best service offering we can have in place, making sure that the services we have today are fantastic and keep our clients really happy, but also making sure we're continually reviewing what else we could be doing for clients, see where they've got a need that we can help, make sure that they understand as much about Amazon as possible to be successful.
Well, it's good to have you on board. And I guess for today's webinar, there's obviously huge amounts of webinars, blogs, articles at the moment that are all focused on how to react to the current situation of COVID-19, because it's obviously, relatively speaking, come out of nowhere. No one was preparing for it. No one thought they were going to have a Black Friday in March and April. So rightly so, everyone at the moment is having to react, and I guess the people that are most flexible and able to react are the ones that are winning. But it seems relatively clear that this virus is going to be with us for some time, whether it's the virus itself or just the after effects. So what we wanted to do is, instead of purely focusing on reacting, which is what people are having to do now, start thinking about, well, what are we going to do in Q4? So many companies rely so heavily on Q4. I think it's probably safe to say that it's going to be a different Q4 for everyone, both in terms of the landscape and the strategies.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's even, is it Q4 as we'd usually treat Q4, or does what's happening now merge into just a big just an entirely long, big year. A lot of questions there, and I think, as you say, Chris, there are a lot of people commenting on what's happening right now, but we wanted to look a bit further into the future and think about how do our clients prepare for what could be coming, and the different strategies, the different thoughts they could be having around how to prepare for that, and make sure there's set up for success as they could possibly be.
Great. So if anyone wants to ask any questions as we go through, feel free to submit them. If I can manage to talk, listen, and read at the same time, then hopefully we'll get to them. If anyone, and thanks to everyone that sent questions in beforehand as well, we'll get through as many as we can. But rest assured, any that we don't get to, we'll still respond to over the next day or so, as best we can. So I guess even though we're mainly going to focus on the future and the second half of the year, maybe it's worth kind of addressing the last 4 or 5 weeks, and maybe you can give us some kind of insight into the actions that Amazon have taken and maybe some of the reasons.
Yeah, I think, I mean, they've done a lot. There's been a huge amount, and I think there's been a mixed response from the various people who are writing articles about what's been done, and there's been, I think, a mixed response from people who want to sell their products through Amazon, and that's been dependent upon the category that they're working in. Some of them have been very pleased, some of them have been a bit frustrated by it, and understandably so. But I think fundamentally Amazon have looked at this and gone, this is not something we're prepared for. This is something we have to react to very quickly, and we have to make some tough decisions. We have to make them fast, and we have to act on them, but be clear to everyone within the organization, everyone who supplies us, and every single one of our customers, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And they sent out those clear messages. These are our priority categories. These are the things that we're going to work very hard to make sure we can get these to our customers as quickly as possible. Everything else is a lower priority. And you kind of see that in all facets of what they've been doing. The promise dates that they've been giving on site have been very conservative. My personal experience, I think yours as well, from the conversations we've had, has been the conservative promise has been very conservative, and deliveries have actually been much faster, which may mean in the short term that customers are, were a bit disappointed how long products would take to get there, but on the whole they've been hopefully pleased by what has happened, and that's the view that Amazon will have been taking, is let's put the customer first. Let's make this work as well as possible for the customer. And you see in the shareholder letter, 2019 shareholder letter that was released last week, 175,000 employees that they're adding to the team. I believe that's across the world from what we could see. But they very quickly, I think within 3 or 4 weeks, filled 100,000 positions in their logistics and FCs, and that's sort of their outbound couriers. That's incredible. And just being able to, on a dime, just flip and turn around and do that just shows how seriously they're taking that, and then add an additional 75,000 people that they're wanting to recruit.
Yeah. I guess, like, in one way you think because they're so big, they've got the resource to react to these situations, but actually because they're so big, it's so much harder for them to react. And the fact that they were so quick in bringing these essential categories in line, and then also so quick to then improve that situation by dynamically base it on ASINs. It's pretty phenomenal the way they responded. And what's quite interesting for me is, we obviously, when it first happened and they started turning off categories, we obviously mainly saw the reaction from suppliers, and rightly so. If you're a supplier in a non-essential category, it's not a great time. But actually, if you look at how consumers are viewing Amazon at the moment, and dare I say, if you look at the Daily Mail comments, which is normally a home for pure negativity, but actually people are thinking about Amazon almost not even like a retailer that's trying to sell to them at the moment. They're thinking of it's almost like a utility company that's here to support them through this crisis. So I think that they've clearly focused, like they always do, on the consumer, and there's had to be some collateral damage at the back end, but but I guess my next question for you would be, am I right in assuming that Amazon are probably planning right now for Q4 with coronavirus?
They'll be, yeah, they have to. They have to consider everything that they're learning right now in the moment and reacting to that and putting actions in place for that immediately. But they also need to be thinking about what are the consequences of that throughout the rest of the year. How do they make sure that they are prepared for whatever may come? They've essentially tooled up their internal teams in a very quick turnaround fashion in the way that they would for a Q4. And they've done that now, this time in year when really they weren't prepared to do it. When they do it for Q4, they're planning months, even several quarters out in advance for when they're going to be doing that. Now they'll be thinking, okay, we've just pulled in this huge amount of resource. We've just geared up our entire business to respond to this demand. What are the next steps? Do we now expect we're at a new level of normal in terms of volume? And probably not. You know, as lockdown eases, it's probably going to ease off a bit. But I think it's unrealistic to think we're going to get back down to pre-COVID-19 levels. So now they need to readjust their plans for whatever they were thinking for Q4 and assume it's going to be bigger than any forecast that they had in place previously. And what does that look like? How are they going to do that? And how are they going to communicate that then down through the supply base to make sure everything's set up so that customers, when they come in Q4, are happy with what happens and have a good experience, a positive experience in what they're looking for.
Yeah, because I guess in March and April, there's been some unbelievable success stories across all categories, but probably a huge number of those success stories have kind of shot up and then just suddenly gone to zero because no one's planning on Christmas style stock levels in March. But I think it's probably safe to predict that the combination of whether it's still COVID-19 in Q4 or the after effects like social distancing, changed consumer behavior, it's going to be an unbelievable Q4, I would assume, for Amazon with Black Friday, Christmas, Boxing Day, plus the uplift.
Yeah, all the signs are there, all the potential is there, and then it comes down to individual brands how they get prepared for making the most of that and being part of that success story. I think that's the critical piece.
So imagine, go back 4 weeks and imagine you're still category leader at Amazon. What would you be saying to your vendors in order to kind of prepare them for Q4?
I think critically it's going to be, there's a lot of unknowns ahead for all of us, but let's do everything we can to plan for success, and that involves putting flexibility into your supply chains. Amazon, I think, have demonstrated that they are flexible and they are reactive and they are doing whatever it takes to make the most and to be prepared for what's happening. And it would be asking suppliers to do the same thing. So if possible, ring-fence stock specifically for Amazon, be ready to flex that up, be ready to flex it down, because there may be some impacts that mean the success isn't where it's forecast to be. Use the forecasts that have been provided, but bear in mind the further out we're looking, it's not going to, it gets less predictable. So in that first 4 week period, you've probably got a fairly good idea from forecasts, but beyond that, it's a bit more difficult. So think about what else you can do with your supply chain teams, how you can engage them in the process, how you can start thinking about the other options that are available. Vendor flex, using things like picks, using drop ship, so direct fulfillment. So if something like this happens again, if there's a second wave, then you're not as much exposed by whether Amazon's network can take care of your stock, but you're able to find a route to customer using the Amazon website and the sales on Amazon, but shipping directly without being constrained by anything that's going on within Amazon at that point in time.
And with on the Seller Central side, which was kind of which was severely hampered with the turning off of non-essential categories because it literally didn't let you replenish stock into FBA. Obviously, people quickly reacted and set up fulfilled by merchant solutions, which is really fast. As long as you've got a way of fulfilling orders, it's super quick. It's self-service on Seller Central. On the Vendor Central side, to set up things like Vendor Flex and Picks and Dropship, is that a longer lead time? Do vendors need to be kind of getting their fulfillment solutions in place now, ready for Q4? Would you say?
I'd definitely say get started on it now. Absolutely, protect yourself. Dropship direct fulfillment is quite straightforward. Is one of the quicker ones. Vendor Flex, you need to be having conversations with Amazon about that far enough in advance to get things up and running. You'll need to be running through business cases internally as well to get. I'm sure there'll be sign-offs within supplier businesses to make sure that it's all everything that they're happy with. So I think going through that process now, even though I'm sure everyone's very, very busy and focusing on the here and now, thinking ahead and getting that prepared is going to be the way to set yourself up for that success. Definitely.
And I guess the beauty of dropship is you can react quickly to sales spikes without having to worry about booking slots, Amazon placing POs. As long as, I guess, if you're able to run the same inventory processes for other retailers as well, so that you're effectively always in control of your inventory, instead of having 50 pallets in retailer A, 50 pallets in retailer B, and then suddenly that retailer can't trade anymore. That's kind of just stock that's wasted. So I guess it's not just an Amazon challenge, but actually it's an overall challenge of how do I have most control over my inventory going into Q4, so that whichever channel is open, because actually Amazon can close. We've seen it in France. I would imagine that they'll be on top of that in the future. I guess it shows the importance of having control of the inventory.
Definitely. And even the route to customer then on that basis, because even with direct fulfillment, there are two routes to customer. One is using Amazon's fulfillment network, and if that's overloaded, then potentially that causes you problems. But if you're using your own courier and you can rely on them, then you've just got that additional element of control over your own destiny.
Yeah, and I guess the operational supply chain side is clearly so crucial to success in Q4 with what's going on. But there's going to be enormous amounts of traffic hitting Amazon, so it's also as important as it was before to make sure product pages are optimized. Your advertising's you've planned significant budget for advertising, because actually there might be new brands are now looking at Amazon as a significant customer for Q4 that weren't before, that were maybe thinking, well, this is actually only our 10th biggest customer. So even though, like, we know the key to success on Amazon is optimize your product pages, drive traffic to the pages, and then make sure it's available, there's actually probably going to be a lot of brands that are relatively new to Amazon being a key customer.
Yeah, I think you're right, and preparing for that, getting those basics in place, capturing the traffic that comes in, being aware that it could well be more competitive if brands are pushing more budget that direction. Preparing for all of that and thinking about how to make the most of what you've got already there, or being very honest with yourself about what you don't have and what needs to be done quickly in order to get things as ready as possible for when you go. And that filters back down again through to your organization and your brand teams. There's no point in your brand team having a fantastic execution plan for Q4, but it's focused on a brand that you can't get hold of any stock on now because it's all stuck in a bricks and mortar retailer or something like that. So making sure you've got that lined up throughout your business is critical as well.
Definitely. And we obviously think of what's going to be the effect of COVID-19 on the markets where Amazon's trading. So, like we've seen in France, that the warehouses are closed. But I suppose what brands need to be thinking in advance of that is the countries where the stock's being produced. So when coronavirus outbreak first happened, obviously it started in Asia. And I think it was almost the challenges of the fact that production was halted across China. It was almost masked a little bit by the fact that the world wasn't talking about coronavirus in the same way it is now. Plus, there was Chinese New Year, which is always a little bit of a bump in the supply chain. And we know that now we've got an office in Hong Kong, and the guys there are often speaking with factories. We believe that factories are around about 80% back to capacity now, but all this talk of a second peak and a kind of a new outbreak of the virus, brands probably need to think about, from a production point of view, maybe going into like Q3 with a bit too much stock, or maybe taking a bit of a bet or a gamble on some additional stock, and certainly getting it into Amazon as soon as possible on the FBA side.
Yeah, there's so many unknowns within everything you've just explained, and will those, if there's a second wave, will those factories be able to produce? What capacity will they be at? How quickly will what they make be consumed elsewhere? It's really hard one to answer. So if you've got the ability to put some money behind it and get some additional inventory in place, then it makes sense to do it, as long as build in an exit strategy for that inventory as well. Make sure that it's not just going to sit there forever. But yeah, absolutely, get as prepared as possible.
And a lot of brands, like rightly so, will use the forecasting tool within ARA, or brand analytics, as it's now known.
Yep.
To plan their stock, and it's obviously a very advanced buying and forecasting algorithm. In your opinion, or your experience, is it advanced enough to already be thinking about coronavirus today, but also coronavirus in 6 or 8 months' time?
It's a really advanced piece of software that's really working on those forecasts, but right now there will be manual intervention somewhere within that process, because the forecasting system has never seen an event like this, and therefore cannot accurately predict what will happen off the back of it. So there's going to need to be some manual inputs to give it the right direction, to give it the right kind of lifts. We may see, and I think we are seeing, suppliers, vendors who are seeing bigger orders than they would usually expect, and how much of that is to fulfill true customer demand, and how much of that is because Amazon are trying to pull in a little additional inventory for what may come over the coming weeks. But they won't be stocking up for the rest of the year. That's no good for their capacity in the warehouses. That's no good for cash flow. All of those usual things. But they need to make sure they've got something there now. So when I was saying earlier about the first few weeks of the forecast is probably most reliable, that's right. And as they move forward, as they learn more, they're going to make adjustments. Quite how far out they're going to be doing that is a difficult one to answer. Quite what level of analysis they're going to go to. Are they going to start talking to people who are specialists in pandemic outbreaks and modeling that to see what might happen and when second waves might hit, and which countries will? I mean, again, loads of questions. I think it's important to use those forecasts, but be aware that they're forecasts. They're not going to be perfect. Yeah. That they're not a crystal ball. They are best guidance that Amazon can offer at this point in time.
It's interesting to think of them kind of trying to consider like virologists and people that are kind of, but actually they've kind of taken the challenge of testing themselves. They've created their own lab so they can test people in their own warehouses. And it probably, when you think the value that's at stake from that buying algorithm, you could be right, even though it seems a crazy suggestion that they're factoring all of these models from universities and experts into their forecast. Who knows? But with Black Friday and events like that, does the algorithm are those orders automated in general, or is there a lot of manual input required for those? Like, can they just plug into their system, add me a Black Friday in April, and it kind of
it's more everything within the business when it comes to that. There aren't people sat there saying, "Oh, this product, I'm going to forecast it." It's very much more what inputs do we have? Okay, we know Black Friday is going to be on this time frame. We know historically what that looked like. That's an input that then the forecasting tool will absorb and generate uplifts off the back of it. It will need some additional inputs, I'm sure, this year. Quite what they'll look like is I'm sure being worked on. But I think if you look in Fund Central at the forecast now, you'll see a number, but it for sure is not going to be the number that lands when Black Friday comes around. The question is, what will it be? And one of the other questions is, depending on how far evolved everything is with coronavirus, how big can they actually go with Black Friday? If they think about the capacity within their warehouses, there's a limit to how much inventory they can hold. So that's probably the ceiling right now, and some questions probably exist over: are they accelerating new build of new FCs? Are they seeing how they can expand the capacity of existing FCs and accelerate that process as well? They'll be looking at all of that.
Oh, cool. And a lot of brands, and a lot of brands we speak to, Amazon isn't there in their top 3 customers, for example, or it wasn't in their top 3 customers, especially maybe food and drink brands, and rightly so. The big supermarkets were probably the dominant customers, but I guess everyone needs to start thinking about Amazon for Q4 as a top 3 customer, because it's probably the most likely to definitely be serving the customer, and even more than just thinking of it as a key customer, I would say that you should probably be thinking about not just Amazon in the country where you're based, but I would assume any French companies that have just been relying on Amazon France are probably kicking themselves right now that they don't have products set up and optimized in Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. So there's just so much that brands can do now to be prepared for Q4, both operationally, but also actually in terms of looking at additional markets where Amazon can serve.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I think what's really unknown, but you can only begin to imagine, is how many people are going to Amazon now and discovering that they sell things that they never knew that Amazon even was in the game of. And where I've just come from, beers, wines and spirits is a great example of that. I think for the last 3 years, when I've told people what I do for Amazon, they go, "Oh, they sell beers, wines and spirits." I had no idea. Yeah. I'm sure that's changed. I'm sure that's changed. I can tell you that just by going on and trying to buy some myself and seeing how much out of stock there is. So that awareness now is, it's not just beer, wines and spirits, it's across all those other categories, and that's something to consider when you think about what your strategy has been with Amazon. If you're in one of those categories, to what it now becomes, if that awareness is retained and behaviors change within customers, do they stop buying it at their usual retailer and they go to Amazon now because they found that they can get it and it's really convenient and it's when they want? Yeah. Maybe it hasn't been, maybe it's been a bad experience, but for the most part, I'd say that's not the case.
Yeah. And that takes me quite nicely onto the next question, actually, which is around grocery, because grocery is from the outside looking in, it's clearly a massive part of Amazon's strategy. I'm not expecting you to confirm yes or no, because I imagine Amazon wouldn't be happy with that. But looking from the outside in, clearly Amazon wants to be a dominant player in grocery, one way or another, whether that's stores or purely online. Food and drink brands particularly probably haven't been focusing too much on Amazon in the past, because certainly in the UK, fresh offering has been relatively limited in parts of the country. Pantry's never been a huge part of the business. This seems like an opportunity for Amazon, because they're obviously quite a long way behind their competitors in this sector, because people like Tesco and Sainsbury's are strong retailers that aren't disappearing like some of the department stores, etc. But this seems like a period of time where Amazon can flex its muscle and its ability to kind of invest hard and quickly. Do you see, ignoring what you already know, I guess, from the inside, but can you envisage, Amazon? We've already seen they announced with Morrison's this week that they're expanding the reach of Amazon Fresh.
Yep.
Would you think that maybe this time next year Amazon will be, because I don't think many people would have considered it as one of their top 4 options for where to buy groceries in the UK. I don't think. Do you think that's going to change?
I don't know if it's going to change overnight. I think grocery shopping is people have an emotional attachment almost to where they buy their groceries usually. But if I guess if Amazon are going to do anything, and you can go back to the 1997 shareholder letter, which is always attached to the latest shareholder letter, and one of the things in there is about making bold investments and being bold about making those decisions and going after it, and being ready to react and ready to pounce. Now's a perfect time for them to be able to do that, and rolling out new offerings, new areas in the last week at a time like this when there's a huge demand for it. I mean, what better way to capture people's attention and let them know that, look, we're in your area now, and if they know there's a need. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Was it planned for now, or is it something that was just in the pipeline has been brought forward? I'm not sure. Either way, it's perfect timing, because now they've got people in those areas who maybe were struggling to get delivery slots with their usual grocers, and they're able now to get supply via Amazon.
Yep.
What a great way to capture a new customer base.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amazon to the rescue.
Yeah, exactly.
And with those brands where Amazon's not been like a must supply retailer in the past, like maybe people supplying food and drink, as a category leader in one of those categories, what was the main pushback that you would get from brands where you would obviously, you'd be looking at the data saying, you're crazy, you should be supplying Amazon, we're going to sell thousands of units. What was the kind of normal reason for people not wanting to kind of go fully in with Amazon?
I think the big frustrations were usually focused around supply chain. The way that Amazon wanted to do things is not how everyone else has historically done things. So a good example would be Amazon buying in case quantities rather than, or even single units for that matter, rather than truckloads. And that's really difficult for supply chains of suppliers to deal with, and how they struggle to justify that. And to some degree, I get it. But on the flip side, there's although the business may not be there today, Amazon are serious about going after that business and being, they've done it in many categories already. They don't open up new categories without the expectation that they can be successful in those categories, and they will find ways and means of making that possible. So it's all about the future. It's all about making those long-term decisions, and it's all about going after the opportunity. If you're set up today with them for success, then when they get to that tipping point, when they're at that really critical mass, and you're in there and you're set up and you're optimized and you're making the most of it, then you're in a great place to be successful with it and join in with that success. And that means being flexible, I think, in the way that you operate and the way you engage with Amazon. Understand that the way things have been done forever with the grocers, with your other customers, is the way that you're set up. But is that the way you should always be set up? Should you be asking questions of your own supply chain about what is the best way? How can we make this most efficient? What else can we do? And I think then it comes back around to what we were talking about earlier with those different supply chain solutions. Do they fit the business model? Can it be made to work? Maybe it can't, but what can be done? And I think asking those questions and challenging your teams is a really critical way of doing it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When I look at the brands that we work with, the ones that react to an Amazon unique way of doing something with, that's not how we do it, are always slightly slower to see the benefit of Amazon than the ones that say, okay, that's not how we do it right now, but how can we optimize our processes? And it is, shipping out small order quantities is never anyone's favorite way of doing it, but it's also not to say that more traditional retailers aren't going to shift there, because retail has to change. It's already changed so much, and it would surprise me if more and more retailers don't move to like a self-service model where they push a lot of the hard work onto suppliers.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other thing I would say is that Amazon are not perfect either. So when they roll out something new, they'll be doing it with the best intentions. They'll be doing it in a way that they think is going to be the best, most optimal way of achieving it. But maybe they learn along the way that it's not. And maybe you learn that with them as part of getting on board early. But be willing to learn, be willing to be part of that process, be willing to be included early enough to give the feedback, to learn with them, and to adapt as it goes. I mean, hopefully the majority of things work out as planned and are perfect, but bear in mind that not 100% of things will be. And I think that's a key thing to just have in the back of your mind as you go through those things.
Yeah, no, I think probably the only thing that's guaranteed over the next 6 months is that nothing will be the same week to week. So it's all about just being as nimble as possible and just having people dedicated to just understanding what's happening, what's changing, and that's probably seems like a huge investment for a business that maybe doesn't even really want to hire someone full time to account manage Amazon, but you really need someone with their ear to the ground at the moment that's just understanding everything that's going on. Obviously, you can sign up for the Molzi newsletter, molzi.com, to understand most of that when it happens. So just a reminder, if anyone wants to send any questions, we can try and address them. We've had a question from, I want to say Sarah, but maybe Sarah. Apologies if I've got that wrong. What do you expect the upcoming peak seasons, for example, Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, for the non-essential categories on Amazon? Will they exist this year, do you think?
I think the jury is out on Prime Day at the moment. I imagine a decision has been made internally. Whether that's the final decision or not, who knows? There'll be a lot of, I'm sure they would like to be able to do it, and they would like to be able to do it for all categories, but they're really moving through a big challenge right now, and is the timing right with everything else that they're dealing with? If it's not, how far out do you push it before you start eating into Q4 and everything that happens around that? And so, Prime Day is an interesting one. I think Black Friday, Cyber Monday, they'll be doing everything they can to be prepared for that, not just on essential categories, but non-essential as well.
Yeah. And actually, probably by then, probably long before then, there won't be such a thing as essential and non-essential categories. I guess even now we're seeing that it's basically they call them essential ASINs, but actually they're just best-selling ASINs, aren't they? But a lot of the products that get delivered to my house every day, I would probably class as the least essential that Amazon sells. But definitely Amazon will want to go into Q4 with no restrictions on any category, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. They'll want to unrestrict, they'll unleash the opportunity and demonstrate what they can do, right? And I think right now they're demonstrating some really fantastic results, but it's not demonstrating everything that they're capable of doing, and they'll be aware of that, and they'll be doing everything they can to get back to that place where every single customer who comes on gets a fantastic experience and gets what they're looking for straight away, and it's not out of stock or it's not got a long delivery time. They'll know that that's not the place to be, and they'll know that it's driving frustration, but they're making a very good job of a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, maybe we'll see department stores, Debenhams, House of Fraser, maybe this time next year there'll be Amazon fulfillment centers in cities. there's not that many uses really for retail space that enormous in the middle of cities. Maybe people like Amazon can capitalize and have much bigger range with 1-2 hour shipping in large cities.
Yeah,
maybe. Amazon's listening, they can they're welcome to use that suggestion.
So this, I mean, it's a whole new world, right? I mean, you just don't know what rates the landlords would be looking for on that kind of thing, and then just what point does that become appealing, and maybe that does become really interesting for Amazon.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Another question: how do we prepare and minimize the slowdown after this overstock period of Amazon?
Um, I guess I would come back to what we were saying earlier. Amazon aren't looking to be overstock. They wouldn't want to do that, or they want to optimize the capacity that they've got available. So they'll be, if they're ordering stock in at the moment, they'll be expecting to be able to sell that out. I think it all comes back to being agile, to being able to react to what is happening, to make sure that you've got the flexibility within your business to adapt what you're doing and how you're approaching it as best as you possibly can. There's no clean answer, but I think to assume that you're going to be in an overstock position is probably and they can't guarantee it, but probably not what you will find. It's not what Amazon will be pushing for at all.
Yeah, but I certainly remember like the end of March. Seems like forever ago now, but when we first started to see the big POs coming in from Amazon, and obviously we're all high-fiving, going, this is the greatest thing ever, but obviously it's not going to last. And then the next week the POs come in and they're bigger, and then the next week the POs come in and they're bigger. And actually, I think it's just hard to put a number on the increase in demand that will be generated by the fact that retail is just turned off overnight. And obviously, retailers have their own online websites that are operating, but my assumption is you go to a store because I need to get something today, and I like going to John Lewis and looking and touching it. But when you think I'm going to buy something online, you think Amazon, and I think it's just hard to imagine that increased demand as a number.
Yeah, it is, and even then, so everyone has the option to go directly to a brand's D2C site and be able to get it directly. But the friction involved in setting up an account or adding payment details, whatever it might be, they know they go to Amazon, it's already there, they've got an account, they've got the address, it's done. It's a much easier process for them. And I think that's where it really makes it easy for them to capitalize on this kind of situation.
Yeah. Another question, again about Prime Day. When we think about Prime Day performance, would it be better to compare it to before COVID-19 months or to last year's Prime Day? So I guess the main question is, will there be a Prime Day?
So if there is a Prime Day, I don't think you can you can't use either of those as a baseline for your forecast, I don't think. Because as we were discussing, if you assume you've now got this whole new world where so many more people are changing their buying habits or their behaviors of how they engage with Amazon, just think about how many people have signed up for Prime during this time period because of everything that's going on, because they're now shopping more on Amazon. They think, well, rather than pay this delivery fee every time, I'm going to get Prime. And hey, I'm at home all the time and I get to watch Prime Video as well as part of it. That's a good deal. That's worth it for me. There's no football on the sports channel, whatever it might be. But it means that they're capturing more people who are eligible for, if they do Prime Day, then the day itself can be so much bigger because more people can access it.
Yeah. Amazon probably doesn't feel like it needs to discount products at the moment. They're already removing certain features like coupons, etc. If they're already at full capacity with supply, why would they? It depends from a marketing point of view if they feel they have to do Prime Day. But it's almost like there's a Prime Day every week at the moment.
Yeah.
Like people only need a certain amount of stuff. So maybe instead of kind of everyone holding on to one day to buy something, people are just buying it when it's available. But then that's a whole nother topic really about whether people are purchasing things they would have bought anyway from retail, or Like, I definitely wouldn't have bought a trampoline had there not been the coronavirus outbreak, and yet in my garden is a giant trampoline. So I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, you can say the same for my swing set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, how much of that is incremental? How much of that has been pulled forward? How much of it is changing behaviours? A lot of questions there, and a lot of analysis is probably required rather than this conversation. But if they do Prime Day, I don't think it's going to be the usual sort of midsummer months. I think if anything, it would be pushed out later. That's my gut. If it wouldn't push out too far. You wouldn't be. I'd be very surprised to see it in Q4 or close to Q4. Do they need to do it? I don't think so, but they pride themselves on providing customers with fantastic prices and very good deals. So it's a big event, and it's always fantastic pricing. They always are very rigorous about that, making sure that it is, and they know that customers love it. So because customers love it, they'll want to be able to still deliver that customer experience. It's whether they can fit it in with everything else that's going on.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting times, and I guess like we said, it's what we think it's going to be today is maybe different to what we think it'll be next week. And obviously, as much as Amazon is great at reacting and controlling huge aspects of the supply chain, they can't control the virus and what happens and what countries decide to do. So definitely, I'm sure it'll be a topic for conversation over and over again. But we've probably taken up enough of everyone's evening for now. We've managed to not have any child meltdowns or disruption, which is
it's a result.
Success. So thanks to everyone that's joined. Any questions that we've not got to, we'll get back to you afterwards. And I think we'll follow up as well with a recording of the webinar if anyone wants to check back on anything. Definitely sign up to our newsletter to kind of get information when we've got future webinars. Molzi.com. Our next one that we've got planned, I think, is the 28th of May. I'm going to be chatting with Bridget, who's our Chief Client Officer and is one of the first employees at Molzi. We're going to be chatting about the many changes and challenges that we've seen over the last 3 years, both in terms of working with Amazon, which is always a challenge, but also, of course, growing a business, which is in itself a bit of a task as well. So, thanks again for joining. Have a great evening. If you want to follow up with any questions with me and Charlie, just find us on LinkedIn and connect, and we'll be sure to help as best we can. And on that note, thanks for joining. Thanks.